"You will remember this night forever," whispered the millionaire to the young woman, and in that instant, under the golden lights of the ballroom, two completely opposite worlds met in a way that would change their lives forever. "Tell me, where are you watching this story from? Do you believe in love that breaks all barriers? If you want to discover how a simple fall and an accidental encounter became the most unexpected romance, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This story will touch your heart." Michael's hand trembled as he touched Emily's face for the first time, and in that moment, under the golden lights of the gala hall, everything changed. She had never been touched in that way, with reverence, as if she were something too precious for this world. The orange blossom perfume she wore mingled with the woody notes of his cologne, creating an olfactory memory that neither of them would ever forget. Sometimes it's the most unexpected encounters that rewrite the stories of our lives, thought Emily, shivering under the caress of his fingers. What seemed to be just another charity evening in New York's high society was about to transform into something that would shake the foundations of two completely opposite lives. Emily was 21 and had never left her small town in Vermont near Burlington, where the scent of pine trees and the sound of cicadas were part of everyday life. She worked as a florist in her family's shop, rising at 5 in the morning to receive deliveries and create arrangements that brought joy to weddings, baptisms, and local celebrations. Her hands always smelled of red carnations and orange blossoms, and she had a habit of humming folk songs while working, old melodies her grandmother had taught her. Michael, at 41, was a real estate titan, known for his calculating coldness and for never maintaining relationships that lasted longer than 3 months. He had built an empire on his own after a youth marked by extreme poverty in the Bronx, and carried the invisible scars of a past he preferred to bury. His greatest inner conflict was his inability to truly trust anyone, the result of family betrayals that had marked him during adolescence. Emily had climbed up a ladder to adjust a cascade of white roses and bougainvillea on the main arch of the Plaza Hotel's reception hall when the heel of her shoe broke. She began to lose her balance, and it was Michael who rushed to hold her. Time seemed to stop when their eyes met. His, the color of roasted coffee, carried a loneliness she instantly recognized, because it was the same one she saw in the mirror every morning. In that moment of vulnerability, when he wasn't protected by his mask of power, something authentic passed between them. "You could have been seriously hurt," he said, his voice betraying a concern that seemed foreign on his lips. "I guess I'm not made for heights," she replied with a shy smile, still dizzy from the avoided fall and from the intensity of his gaze. "I wouldn't be so sure," he murmured, almost to himself. That night, under the crystal constellations of century-old chandeliers, there was an exchange imperceptible to all the guests present, but which resounded like thunder in their souls, that of two people recognizing, for the first time, a part of themselves in the other. A week after the evening at the plaza, Emily had returned to her routine in Burlington. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the family shop, transforming the dewdrops on the flower petals into tiny diamonds. She was arranging peonies for the wedding that would take place the following weekend, when the doorbell tinkled. "Good morning, can I help you?" she began without raising her eyes from her work. "I'm looking for an arrangement that could express something impossible to say with words," replied a male voice that made her immediately freeze. Michael was there, in his impeccable grey suit that singularly contrasted with the rustic atmosphere of the small shop. His presence seemed to fill the entire space, as if the air itself recognized his authority. "Mr. Anderson," she murmured, surprised, "you're far from New York. Call me Michael, please." "And yes, I had a meeting in Boston." He let his sentence trail off, the lie evident in his hesitation. Emily smiled inwardly. Boston was an hour's drive, but in the opposite direction of Burlington from New York. He had no professional reason to be there. "What kind of feelings do you wish to express?" she asked, entering into his game. "Admiration, curiosity, perhaps the possibility of something new," he answered, his eyes never leaving hers. Their fingers brushed when she handed him the final arrangement, a bold mix of red peonies, olive branches, and wild lavender flowers. It was raw, unconventional, but captivating in its imperfect beauty. "It's perfect," he murmured. "How did you know?" "Flowers speak their own language," she said. "I just listened to what you didn't say." He came back the following week, then again. At each visit, he had a different excuse. A gift for his mother, whom he had lost 10 years ago, but Emily didn't know that yet. Flowers for his office, an arrangement for a business dinner. On the 5th visit, when he asked for a bouquet of white lilies, the flowers she had mentioned as her favorites during a previous conversation, she finally understood. It wasn't flowers he was coming to look for 300 miles from New York. "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" he finally asked after paying for lilies he had no intention of taking away. Emily hesitated. She could feel the precipice before her, a decision that she instinctively knew would change everything. She wasn't naive. She knew his reputation. The business magazines talked about the Wolf of New York real estate, his ruthless transactions, and his notorious bachelorhood. "Why me?" she asked with disarming frankness. The question caught him off guard. In his world, no one dared to question him directly. "Because you're the only person who looks at me and simply sees Michael," he replied, with an honesty he hadn't expected to offer. "Not the empire, not the bank account, not the reputation, just me." That evening, they dined in a small restaurant hidden in an alley in Old Burlington, where the 19th century wooden walls oozed history and where the chef prepared a New England clam chowder according to a recipe passed down over 6 generations. For the first time in a long time, Michael didn't check his phone even once. The first obstacle manifested itself in the form of Jessica, Michael's younger sister. Tall, elegant, with the same piercing eyes as her brother, but without the warmth that was beginning to appear in his presence with Emily, she showed up unexpectedly during one of their dinners in a small bistro in Soho. "My dear brother, what a surprise to find you here," she exclaimed, her honeyed voice betraying the opposite. Her scrutinizing gaze evaluated Emily from head to toe, lingering on her simple dress and shoes that were obviously bought at a retail store. "Jessica," Michael replied, his jaw contracting slightly. "This is Emily Bennett." "Enchanted," said Emily, extending her hand with the quiet grace that characterized her. Jessica took her hand with the tips of her fingers. "What charming simplicity. Where are you from, my dear?" "From Burlington, Vermont. I run the family flower shop." A condescending smile stretched Jessica's lips. "How quaint. And how did you meet my brother?" "I'm afraid there aren't many office towers to build in Vermont." Emily felt the tension in Michael's shoulders, but before he could respond, she smiled calmly. "We met at a charity event at the plaza. I was there to arrange the flowers, and your brother was there to be impressive. He succeeded at one, I succeeded at the other." The boldness of the response surprised both Andersons. Michael stifled a laugh, while Jessica readjusted her expression. "Michael, we absolutely must talk about the situation with the Chinese investors," said Jessica, deliberately ignoring Emily. "It's rather urgent." "We'll talk about it tomorrow at the office," he responded firmly. Jessica seemed ready to argue, then thought better of it. "Of course, enjoy your evening." She turned to Emily with an icy smile. "Miss Bennett, I hope we'll have the opportunity to get to know each other better. Michael has so little diversity in his social circle." After her departure, a heavy silence settled. Emily gently placed her hand on Michael's. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Jessica can be protective," Emily suggested. "I was going to say a viper, but your version is more charitable," he said with a half smile. Emily meditated for a moment. She's afraid of losing her brother, or perhaps the influence she has over him. Michael looked at her with amazement. This ability Emily had to see beyond appearances, to understand people's hidden motivations, continually fascinated him. The second obstacle came from within. As the weeks passed, Emily felt more and more like a fish out of water in Michael's world. Dinners in starred restaurants where the waiter spoke 7 languages, operas where she didn't understand the plot, conversations about contemporary art where she had nothing to contribute. One evening in the limousine taking them back from an evening at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Emily remained silent, watching New York's lights whiz by like falling stars. "You didn't like the exhibition?" Michael asked, sensing her discomfort. "It was interesting," she replied diplomatically. "But—" Emily hesitated. "Michael, I know nothing about conceptual art. When everyone was discussing the artist's post-structuralist influences, I was thinking about how the same colors are found in the bouquets I make for summer weddings." She turned her face to him, her eyes reflecting a vulnerability she usually tried to hide. "I'll never be like those women. I'll never have their education, their refinement, their—" Michael placed a finger on her lips to interrupt her. "I don't want them to be you. I want you to be you." He took her face in his hands, the same ones that signed multi-million-dollar contracts, but which became infinitely gentle when they touched her. "When I'm with you, Emily, I feel like I'm breathing for the first time after being underwater for decades. You're real, you're authentic, you're—" He searched for his words. "You're like finding something I didn't even know I had lost." That night, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, they made love for the first time. It wasn't like in romantic movies where everything is perfect and choreographed. There were moments of awkwardness, nervous laughter, whispered questions, but it was real, it was them, and sometimes truth is the purest form of beauty. The driving rain hammered the windows of Michael's office on the 40th floor of the Anderson Tower as he listened to his financial director present the quarterly results. His mind, however, wandered to Emily, to the message she had sent him that morning, a simple photo of the first rose blooming in her grandmother's garden, accompanied by the words, "Beauty is never impatient. It waits for us to be ready to see it. Mr. Anderson." The financial director's voice brought him back to reality. "The projections for the Brooklyn project? Double the budget for green spaces," he replied, surprising everyone around the table. "I want it to be the greenest building in New York. Rooftop gardens, living walls, all powered by solar energy." His team looked at him with amazement. Michael Anderson was known for prioritizing efficiency and profitability above all else. "But, sir, this will considerably reduce our margin," the director began. "True value," Michael interrupted, "is not always measurable on a balance sheet." Later that day, in his Upper East Side apartment, Michael received an unexpected call from his older brother, Paul. The two men hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, since their violent dispute regarding the forced sale of their father's shares in the original family business. "Michael," Paul began without preamble, "Jessica told me about your Nurat friend." Michael gritted his teeth. "I don't see how that concerns you." "Anything that can affect the Anderson empire concerns me," Paul replied, his voice as cold as Michael's. "A florist from the provinces? Seriously, is this a midlife crisis?" "Emily is not up for discussion," Michael cut short. "Not now, not ever." "Listen to me well, little brother," Paul insisted. "I won't let an opportunist destroy everything we've built. Do you remember Julie? How she manipulated you to get those contracts in Chicago? Or Kate, who sold confidential information to our competitors?" Michael closed his eyes, old wounds reopening. There had been too many betrayals, too many people who had approached him only for what he could offer them. "Emily isn't like that," he said, but an insidious doubt infiltrated his mind like a slow poison. That evening, when Emily arrived in New York for the weekend, she found Michael distant, preoccupied. He took her to dinner at the Rainbow Room, the restaurant on the top floor of Rockefeller Center, but the conversation was labored, interspersed with uncomfortable silences. At dessert, Emily put down her spoon and looked at him directly. "Someone spoke to you about me," she said. It wasn't a question. Michael looked at her, surprised by her insight. "How do you know?" "Because you're looking at me as if you're searching for something," she replied gently. "Something that would confirm or refute what you were told." He looked away, staring at the lights of New York, stretching out below them like a terrestrial galaxy. "My brother Paul, he thinks you might be interested in my money, my position." Emily took the blow, the pain evident in her eyes. "I see." She took a deep breath. "And you, what do you think?" The question hit him like a physical blow. What did he really think? He looked at this woman sitting across from him, this woman who had worn the same dress for 3 outings, who marveled at a sunset more than at a luxury jewel, who systematically refused his expensive gifts, but had cried when he had brought her a simple bouquet of wild violets picked in the garden of his childhood. "I think I've spent my life building walls so high that I no longer know how to climb over them myself," he finally admitted. "And I think you're the first person who makes me want to try." Later that night, walking along the Hudson River, hand in hand, Michael told her everything about his childhood in the Bronx, the nights without heating, the hunger that gnawed at his stomach, his father who had abandoned the family for a younger woman, leaving his mother to raise 3 children in poverty, how he had started working at 14, lying about his age to deliver newspapers before school, how he had saved every penny to finance his studies, sometimes sleeping in his car to save on rent. Emily listened without interruption, her thumb gently caressing the back of his hand, her eyes never leaving his. When he had finished, she didn't say she was sorry. She didn't show pity. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with your story. It's part of who you are, and I love who you are." It was as if a dam was giving way within him. Michael felt something break, perhaps the last vestiges of the wall he had so carefully built around his heart. It was a Tuesday morning like any other at the Bennett and Daughters flower shop in Burlington. Emily was finishing watering the orchids when the doorbell tinkled. She turned around, expecting to see Mrs. Lewis coming to pick up her weekly bouquet, but froze upon seeing Jessica Anderson. Michael's sister was impeccable as always, in a cream-colored suit that emphasized her slender silhouette. Her Jimmy Choo heels clicked on the terracotta floor as she advanced into the shop, examining the space with a clinical eye. "Miss Bennett," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a charming family business." Emily wiped her hands on her apron and straightened up. "Miss Anderson, what a surprise. Isn't Michael in New York?" "It's precisely for that reason that I've come to see you," Jessica replied, removing her leather gloves finger by finger. "I'd like to have a conversation, woman to woman." Without waiting for an invitation, she sat down on the only chair reserved for customers. Emily remained standing, instinctively feeling that she would need all her strength for what would follow. "My brother seems infatuated with you," Jessica began. "It's unusual for him. Michael has always been selective but never sincere," Emily suggested, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. Jessica gave a dry little laugh. "I was going to say irrational. You see, my brother has worked all his life to build something meaningful. His empire isn't just a company, it's his legacy." She pulled out a folder from her Hermes bag. "I took the liberty of doing some research on you and your family." Emily felt an icy chill run down her spine. "Your father declared bankruptcy twice before succeeding with this shop. Your mother has a student loan that she never finished repaying, and you yourself abandoned your accounting studies to take over the family business." Jessica made a dramatic pause. "Interesting choices." Emily kept her face impassive, but internally she was overwhelmed. How did Jessica know these details of their life? "What exactly do you expect from me, Miss Anderson?" she asked directly. "I simply wish to make you understand reality," Jessica replied. "Michael and you come from different worlds, incompatible worlds. He may be charmed by your provincial simplicity for the moment, but how long will it last? A month? 3? She stood up, approaching Emily. "And when he tires of you, what will remain? Broken hearts, missed opportunities, and perhaps business decisions compromised by emotion." Emily felt anger rising within her, replacing the initial fear. "You don't know your brother as well as you think." Jessica smiled as if Emily had just confirmed something. "On the contrary, my dear, I know him better than anyone. I was there when he built all this from nothing. I was there when each of his previous relationships ended exactly the same way." She came even closer, lowering her voice. "I'll still be there when this one ends. Will you still be standing?" She placed an envelope on the counter. "An offer, generous, for the shop. More than its market value. Consider it an investment in your family's future, and in yours." Emily stared at the envelope, feeling a buzzing in her ears. "You want to buy the family shop to get me away from your brother?" "I want to offer you an elegant exit," Jessica corrected, "before things become complicated." After Jessica's departure, Emily remained motionless for a long time, staring at the envelope as if it contained a venomous snake. Then, with a decisive gesture, she threw it in the trash without opening it. That night she didn't sleep. Jessica's words spun in her head like an infernal carousel. What if she was right? What if all this was just a temporary fantasy, destined to crash against the wall of reality? The next day, when Michael called her as he did every morning, she didn't answer, nor to the 3 subsequent calls, nor to the messages. Sometimes loving someone means recognizing when you are an obstacle to their happiness, she thought, tears silently rolling down her cheeks as she mechanically arranged lilies for a wedding that would take place the following weekend. 3 weeks had passed since Jessica had visited Emily's shop, 3 weeks of silence that Michael couldn't understand. His calls remained unanswered, his messages read but ignored. He had even sent flowers to the shop, an irony that didn't escape him. But they had come back with a polite but firm note. "Thank you, but I cannot accept." In his office at the top of Anderson Tower, he had become a shadow of himself. Irritable, distracted, he cancelled meetings and spent hours staring at the New York skyline, seeking answers in the grey March sky. "You have to pull yourself together," Robert, his childhood friend and the company's lawyer, told him during a lunch that he had practically had to force Michael to accept. "You have projects stagnating, decisions pending. The board is worried." Michael pushed away his untouched plate. "I don't understand, Rob. Everything was going well, better than well. And then, from one day to the next, nothing, as if I had imagined these 6 months." Robert studied him over his wine glass. In 30 years of friendship, he had never seen Michael like this. Vulnerable, hurt, almost human. "You love her," he stated, surprised by his own conclusion. Michael didn't respond immediately, staring at his water glass as if it contained the mysteries of the universe. "I think I do," he finally said, "and it terrifies me." Robert nodded slowly. "You know, old friend, sometimes the greatest businessmen make the worst detectives. Have you thought that something might have caused this sudden change?" Michael frowned. "Like what?" "I don't know. An external intervention? Information that would have made her doubt?" Robert shrugged. "Your family has never been very welcoming to your previous relationships." Michael froze, a suspicion dawning in his mind. "Jessica," he murmured. He left the restaurant without finishing his meal, already calling his assistant to prepare his private jet. "I'll be in Burlington in 3 hours. Cancel all my appointments." In Burlington, the Bennett and Daughters shop was closed, a simple sign indicating exceptional closure on the door. Michael stood in the rain, knocking desperately, when a neighbor came out of the adjacent bakery. "She's not here," the woman said, wiping flour from her hands on her apron. "She left 2 days ago for Martha's Vineyard with her grandmother." "Martha's Vineyard?" repeated Michael, trying to remember where Emily had mentioned this name. "The island," the baker clarified. "Her grandmother has an old house there. That's where she always goes when she needs to reflect." Michael thanked her and rushed to his car, his driver already searching for the route to the ferry that would take them to Martha's Vineyard. Meanwhile, on the Massachusetts island, Emily was walking barefoot on the deserted beach, the sea wind whipping her hair. Her grandmother's house, an old fisherman's dwelling with faded blue shutters, was the only place where she had always felt safe. "You can't run away from your problems by coming here every time, my little one," her grandmother had told her that morning, while preparing her coffee with milk as she did when she was a child. "Even on an island, they end up catching up with you." Emily had smiled sadly. "I'm not running away, Grandma. I'm protecting." "And who exactly are you protecting, him or yourself?" The question had pursued her all day. Now, facing the deep blue sea, she no longer knew. Jessica's words still resonated, raising doubts she had always carried within herself. Was she enough? Could she ever belong in his world? And most importantly, would she be a burden to this man who already carried so many responsibilities? That's when she saw him, a solitary figure walking on the beach from the small harbor, his steps determined despite the sand that slowed his progress. Even at this distance, she would have recognized his walk anywhere. Michael stopped a few meters from her, wet from the spray and the fine rain. His usually perfectly combed hair was in disarray, his wrinkled shirt half out of his pants, and he had never looked so handsome in Emily's eyes. "Why?" he asked simply, his voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. Emily felt the tears rising. "Because I don't want to be the one holding you back." "Holding me back?" he repeated, incredulous. "Emily, you're the only thing that has moved me forward in years." He took a step closer, then stopped, as if fearing she might run away. "What did my sister tell you?" Emily's eyes widened. "How do you know?" "Because I know you," he replied gently. "You wouldn't disappear without reason. And Jessica has always been proactive in protecting what she considers the family's interests." He extended his hand, palm open to the sky. "Tell me, please." So Emily told him everything. Jessica's visit, the research on her family, the offer for the shop, and above all the doubts sown like poisonous seeds. When she had finished, Michael remained silent for a long time, staring at the horizon as if seeking answers there. Then he turned to her, a new determination in his eyes. I've spent my life building an empire, he said slowly, accumulating power, influence, money. I thought that was what I wanted, what I needed. He stepped forward and took her face in his hands. But you know what I've discovered in these past weeks without you? That all of this means nothing if I have no one to share it with. Not as a possession, not as a trophy, but as a partner. His eyes shone with an emotion Emily had never seen in him before, a raw, honest vulnerability. I love you, Emily Bennett, and I would rather lose every penny, every building, every contract than lose you. Emily felt something break within her, perhaps the barrier she had erected around her heart since Jessica's visit. I'm afraid, she admitted. Afraid of not being enough, of not belonging in your world. Michael shook his head. There is no my world and your world. There's just the world we choose to create together. He drew her to him, and despite his wet clothes, Emily felt a warmth envelop her. And I choose to create mine with you if you'll have me. The return to New York was like plunging into a whirlwind. As soon as Michael and Emily set foot in the Upper West Side apartment, his phone rang. It was Robert, his usually composed tone replaced by unusual urgency. Michael, you need to come back immediately. Thompson has launched a tax fraud investigation. It's in all the business papers. Emily saw Michael's face pale. Richard Thompson was his main competitor in Boston, a man known for his ruthless methods and dubious political connections. On what basis? Michael asked, his voice instantly regaining the professional hardness that Emily was beginning to distinguish from the man she knew in private. Allegations regarding the Chicago project. Documents have leaked, suggesting bribes to urban planning officials. It's a setup, of course, but it's convincing enough for the financial prosecutor to get involved. Michael hung up after promising to be at the office in an hour. He turned to Emily, the weight of the world suddenly seeming to bear down on his shoulders. I have to go, he said simply. I know, she replied. Go. I'll be here when you get back. But he didn't come back that night, nor the next. Days turned into weeks, during which Michael locked himself in his offices with his lawyers and advisors, trying to counter the media storm that threatened to destroy everything he had built. Emily saw him withdrawing, locking himself in that emotional fortress he had constructed long before meeting her. She stayed in the apartment, waiting for calls that became increasingly short, watching the news that spoke of the Anderson case as the financial scandal of the year. One morning, while preparing coffee, she heard a report that froze her in place. Sources close to the case suggest that the incriminating documents may have been provided by someone in Michael Anderson's close circle, possibly a recent relationship who would have had access to his personal files. The cup she was holding shattered on the floor. This insinuation was absurd. She had never had access to Michael's professional files, but the mere suggestion that she might be involved terrified her. Not for herself, but for him. If their relationship became an element of this case, a weak point that his enemies could exploit. That night, when Michael finally returned, his face was hollowed by fatigue and worry. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and drank it in one go, before noticing that Emily was watching him from the bedroom threshold. You should sleep, he said gently. How could I? She replied. Michael, I heard the news today. They're insinuating that I could be involved. He shook his head violently. It's ridiculous. No one who knows you would believe it for a second. But no one knows me, she murmured. For them, I'm just the provincial who appeared in your life at the perfect moment for a scandal. A heavy silence settled between them. Emily approached and took his hands in hers. I think I should go back to Burlington, she said gently. Just for a while, until this storm calms down. Michael looked at her as if she had just hit him. You want to leave? Now? I don't want to be a distraction or an additional complication when you need all your concentration, she explained. I don't want to be used against you. He withdrew his hands abruptly. That's exactly what they want, to separate me from everything that really matters. Michael. No, he interrupted, his voice suddenly cold. If you want to go, I won't stop you. But don't pretend it's to protect me. His words hit her like a slap. What do you mean? Maybe Jessica was right, he said, the words coming out like poison. Maybe all this was too good to be true. The first difficulty and you're ready to run. Emily felt the tears rising but held them back. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, he replied sharply. I learned that a long time ago. I just thought that... He didn't finish his sentence, turning away to hide the pain in his eyes. Emily remained motionless, torn between the desire to take him in her arms and the desire to slap him for his injustice. Instead, she made a decision. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "I'm staying. And we're going to face this together." She approached his desk, pulled out a notepad and began writing. "Now, tell me everything about this Chicago case. Every detail." Michael looked at her with surprise. "Why?" "Because I did 2 years of accounting before taking over the family business," she replied with a small smile. "I recognize a falsified balance sheet when I see one, and because when you arrange flowers, you develop an eye for details that most people miss." That night they worked side by side until dawn, combing through hundreds of documents. And it was Emily who, at 6 in the morning, with eyes reddened by fatigue but shining with triumph, found the first irregularity in the supposedly incriminating documents, a signature dated on a day when Michael was documented as being abroad, with irrefutable proof. "It's a fake," she murmured. "And not even a good one." Michael looked at her with a mixture of admiration and shame for having doubted her. "Emily, I'm sorry for what I said." She placed a finger on his lips. "Later. Now, we have a battle to win." It was the moment when Michael truly realized that he hadn't just found a romantic partner, but an ally, an equal. Someone who didn't need to be protected from the world, but who was ready to face it by his side. The following 2 weeks passed in a blur of frantic activity. Michael's legal team, reinforced by Emily's insightful observations, worked day and night to build their defense against Thompson's accusations. They had identified several inconsistencies in the supposedly incriminating documents, but the damage was already done in the press. Anderson Group shares were plummeting, investors were withdrawing their support, and some major projects were suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. On a particularly difficult evening, Michael returned home after a disastrous meeting with the board of directors. His tie loosened, shoulders slumped. He seemed to be carrying the weight of the world. "They want me to step aside temporarily," he announced to Emily, who was waiting for him in the living room. "Until the case is resolved." Emily felt her heart constrict. "They can't force you, it's your company." Michael gave a bitter laugh. "It was my company. Now it's a publicly traded corporation, with shareholders and a board of directors that has the power to remove me if I refuse to cooperate." He collapsed onto the couch, passing a tired hand over his face. "Everything I've worked for, everything I've sacrificed." Emily sat next to him, taking his hand in hers. "It's not over, Michael. We have evidence. The truth will come out." "The truth," he repeated bitterly. "In this world, truth matters little. What matters is perception. And at the moment, the perception is that I'm guilty." He rose abruptly and headed for the bar, pouring himself a glass of cognac, which he drank in one gulp. "You know what's ironic? I've spent my life building this image of Michael Anderson, the ruthless businessman. I cultivated this reputation because I thought it would protect me. Now it's exactly this reputation that condemns me." Emily watched him in silence, feeling that he needed to externalize his frustration. "Everyone is ready to believe that I bribed officials, falsified documents, lied and cheated," he continued, his voice rising. "Because that's what Michael Anderson does, isn't it? The orphan from the Bronx who fought for every inch, who stops at nothing." He threw his empty glass against the wall, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Emily jumped, but didn't move. "I'm tired, Emily," he murmured. All anger suddenly evaporated. "Tired of fighting, tired of proving my worth, tired of being this man." In the silence that followed his confession, Emily rose and approached him. She placed a hand on his cheek, gently forcing him to look at her. "Then don't be this man anymore," she said simply. "Just be Michael." These simple words touched him more deeply than she could imagine. For the first time since the beginning of this crisis, Michael felt something give way within him, not a collapse, but a release, as if a knot that had been tied too long was finally beginning to untie itself. The following day, against the advice of his counselors, Michael convened a press conference. Emily accompanied him, remaining discreetly in the background as he faced an army of journalists. "I've spent my life building," he began, his voice calm and assured despite the emotion. "Buildings, fortunes, reputations, but also walls around myself. Today I am here to tell the truth, not the one you expect, but my truth." He spoke for 20 minutes, without notes, without the facade of the impenetrable businessman he had always presented to the world. He spoke of his childhood in the Bronx, of his mother who worked 2 jobs to feed her children, of his promise to never return to poverty. He admitted his past mistakes, his obsession with control, his distrust of others. "I built the Anderson Group stone by stone, contract by contract," he continued. "I was hard, I was demanding, but I never crossed the line of legality. Not out of virtue, perhaps, but out of pride. Because I wanted to succeed on my own terms, proving to this world that didn't believe in me that I could do it." He finished by looking directly into the cameras. "I am temporarily stepping aside from my duties during the duration of this investigation, not because I am guilty, but because I want the truth to be established beyond a shadow of doubt. And for those who orchestrated this campaign against me, know this: I am no longer afraid. Not of you, not of failure, not even of the truth." When he descended from the podium, ignoring the questions shouted by journalists, Emily was waiting for him. She said nothing, simply taking his hand in hers as they left the hall. That night, in the intimacy of their apartment, Michael cried for the first time since his mother's death 15 years earlier. Silent tears flowing down his face while Emily held him, whispering words of comfort in the Vermont accent she usually tried to hide, phrases that her grandmother had taught her for moments of great sorrow. "What am I going to do now?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. Emily thought for a moment before answering. "You're going to rest, heal, rediscover who Michael is when he's not building empires." She hesitated, then added softly, "Come with me to Vermont. Not for a visit, not for a weekend. Come live with me at least until this storm passes." Michael looked at her, surprised. "Live in Vermont? And the shop?" "Lily can manage it. She already does when I'm in New York," Emily replied. "We could go to my grandmother's house on Martha's Vineyard. No one would look for us there." For the first time in weeks, a real smile appeared on Michael's face. "Escape to a Mediterranean island with a beautiful florist. It sounds like the beginning of a novel. Or perhaps a new chapter," Emily suggested. Emily's grandmother's house on Martha's Vineyard had none of the luxury to which Michael was accustomed. It was an old fisherman's dwelling renovated with love over the decades, its walls whitewashed limestone, its pale blue shutters flaked by sun and salt. It was perched on a small hill, offering a breathtaking view of the Atlantic Ocean that changed color with every mood of the sky. The first weeks were difficult for Michael. Used to constant action, quick decisions, and New York's frantic pace, he felt like a caged lion in this tranquil paradise. He compulsively checked his phone, despite the capricious internet connection, and spent hours on the phone with Robert and his lawyers. Grandma Rose, Emily's grandmother, observed this coming and going with a mixture of amusement and wisdom. Small and robust, with a face tanned by 70 years of Atlantic sun, and eyes of a faded blue identical to her granddaughter's, she had welcomed Michael without questions or judgment. One morning, while Michael was still on the phone on the terrace, vehemently discussing a legal strategy, Grandma Rose approached him with a basket and a pair of scissors. "Come," she said simply when he hung up, already heading toward the small vegetable garden behind the house without waiting for his response. Michael followed her, more out of politeness than interest. The garden was a well-maintained rectangle where tomatoes, eggplants, zucchini, aromatic herbs, and edible flowers grew. "Cut the ripe tomatoes," she ordered, handing him the scissors. "The dark red ones, not the orange ones." Michael looked at the scissors as if they were an alien object. "Mrs. Bennet, Rose," she interrupted him. "Or Grandma Rose, if you prefer." And it wasn't a suggestion. There was in her voice a quiet authority that strangely reminded him of Emily. Michael took the scissors and knelt awkwardly in front of the tomato plants, feeling the absurdity of the situation. Him, Michael Anderson, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar real estate group, on all fours in the dirt, cutting tomatoes under the supervision of an old lady. "Not that one," Grandma Rose corrected when he was about to cut a slightly underripe tomato. "Listen to the tomato. It will tell you when it's ready." Michael looked at her with incredulity. "Listen. To the tomato? Not with your ears," she sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a particularly obtuse child. "With your eyes, your nose, your fingers. Life isn't in your phone, Michael. It's here." She took a tomato in her wrinkled hand, weighing it gently. "This one is perfect. Heavy for its size, skin taut but not hard, the smell already sweet even before cutting it." Michael looked at her hands, then at his own. His were soft, well-groomed, hands that signed contracts but created nothing tangible. Hers were marked by decades of work, but knew the secret language of growing things. That day he harvested tomatoes for 2 hours, completely forgetting his phone ringing in the distance. That night, when they ate a simple salad composed of the tomatoes he had harvested, seasoned with olive oil, fresh basil and salt, Michael understood for the first time the difference between eating and savoring. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, imperceptibly, Michael began to change. He rose with the sun, no longer out of work habit, but to enjoy the golden morning light. He learned to recognize the songs of different birds, to predict the weather by observing the sea, to feel when the figs were perfectly ripe. Emily observed him with quiet joy, seeing him rediscover a part of himself that he had buried under decades of ambition. She sometimes caught him looking at the horizon with a pensive expression that was no longer tinged with anxiety, but with contemplation. One evening, as they sat on the terrace sharing a bottle of local wine and watching the sun set over the sea, Michael broke a comfortable silence. "I received an offer today," he said softly. "Thompson is proposing a deal. He withdraws his accusations, publicly admits they were based on falsified documents in exchange for a merger of our companies, with him as CEO of the combined group." Emily looked at him carefully. "And what do you think?" Michael contemplated his wine glass, where the last rays of the sun created ruby reflections. "6 months ago, I would have laughed in the face of anyone who proposed this to me. 3 months ago, I would have destroyed him for daring to try to trap me." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting a new peace. "Today, I wonder if it's all still worth it." Emily placed her hand on his. "What's worth it to you now?" Michael looked at their intertwined hands, then at the garden where Grandma Rose was humming while watering her plants, then at the sea darkening on the horizon. "I think I don't really know anymore," he admitted. "My whole life has been defined by building this empire. I don't know who I am without it." Emily smiled gently. "Then maybe it's the opportunity to find out." That night, for the first time since his arrival, Michael slept deeply, without nightmares, without waking up to check his emails. And when he woke up, with the birds singing and the soft dawn light filtering through the shutters, he felt something he hadn't felt since childhood, the simple joy of a new day. Summer was coming to an end on Martha's Vineyard. Tourists were becoming rarer, evenings were getting cooler, and a different tranquility was settling in, that of a place preparing to hibernate, to find its true soul after months of sharing. Michael had changed, both physically and mentally. His complexion had tanned, his features had softened, and he had grown a beard that was graying in places, giving him the air of an intellectual adventurer rather than a real estate titan. But the most striking change was in his eyes. The constant mistrust, the cold evaluation that had been his trademark, had given way to an attentive presence, a way of truly seeing the world and the people around him. That morning, he was sitting on the small stone wall that separated Grandma Rose's garden from the surrounding brush, quietly reading an old novel found on a dusty shelf in the house. Emily was watching him from the kitchen window, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. She loved this man, not the Michael Anderson of business magazines, but this one who now laughed easily, who listened to Grandma Rose's stories with sincere attention, who had learned to fish with the old mariners of the harbor and returned proud as a child with his catch of the day. The phone rang, interrupting her contemplation. It was Robert, Michael's lawyer and friend. "Emily," he said without preamble, "is Michael with you?" "He's in the garden," she replied, noting the urgency in his voice. "What's happening?" Robert hesitated. "I have significant news, but I'd prefer to speak to him directly." Emily went out with the phone, handing it to Michael, who raised his eyes from his book with a smile that vanished upon seeing her expression. "Rob," he said, taking the device. "What is it?" Emily walked away to give him privacy, but not before seeing his face pass through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, then something that almost resembled wonder. When he returned to the house an hour later, after walking alone along the beach, his expression was indecipherable. "Michael," Emily asked gently, "bad news?" He sat at the kitchen table, seeming to search for words. "Not exactly. It's complicated." He took a deep breath. Jessica confessed. "Confessed what?" asked Emily, confused. Everything, Michael replied, his expression still incredulous. She's the one who provided the falsified documents to Thompson. She orchestrated this whole affair. Emily sat down abruptly, stunned. Your own sister, but why? Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he made when deeply troubled. Apparently she had been working with Thompson for months. She wanted to save me from myself. He gave a joyless laugh. She told Robert she saw me changing, becoming weak, losing my predator instinct. Because of you. Emily felt a coldness settle in her chest. She tried to destroy your career to get me away from you? Not exactly, Michael corrected. She tried to provoke a crisis that would force me to become the man I was again, the one who would fight with all possible weapons, who would crush his opponents without mercy, who would put business above everything. He looked at her directly. Above you. Silence settled between them, heavy with meaning. What happens now? Emily finally asked. Robert has all the confessions recorded. Jessica has agreed to resign from the board of directors and sell her shares. Thompson is furious, of course, but he has no choice but to distance himself completely from this affair if he doesn't want to be implicated. Michael sighed deeply. The board has asked me to return. Immediately. Emily felt her heart constrict. Of course they wanted him back. He was Michael Anderson, the empire builder, and despite these months of peace on Martha's Vineyard, despite the harvested tomatoes and shared sunsets, that's who he was. When do you leave? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Michael looked at her for a long time, as if searching for something in her face. Then, to her great surprise, he smiled. Not the calculated smile he reserved for negotiations, but the authentic and warm one she had learned to cherish. I'm not leaving, he said simply. Emily looked at him, confused. But you just said... I said they asked me to return, he clarified. I didn't say I accepted. He stood and approached her, taking her hands in his. Emily, these last months have taught me more about myself than the previous 40 years. I built an empire, yes, but at what price? He looked out the window toward the garden where Grandma Rose was pruning her rose bushes with the precision of a surgeon. That 80-year-old woman has more wisdom in her little finger than I do in all my supposed financial intelligence. She knows the secret that I've spent my life ignoring. What secret? Emily murmured. Michael turned to her, his eyes shining with a new emotion. That true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we appreciate. Not in what we control, but in what we cultivate. He suddenly knelt before her, completely surprising her. I will go back to New York, yes, but not to resume my life from before, to build a new one, and I'd like you to come with me. Not as a guest in my world, but as my partner to create a new one. He pulled from his pocket a simple silver ring, adorned with a small rough stone the color of lavender. It's not a Tiffany diamond. It's an amethyst I found on the South Beach, the one you love so much. I had it mounted by the old jeweler in the village. Emily felt the tears rising as he continued. I'm not offering you the security of a real estate empire. I'm offering you the adventure of building something different, together. He took a deep breath. Emily Bennett, would you agree to share your life with me? To show me, day after day, how to see the world through your eyes? To remind me of what truly matters when I forget, because I will forget sometimes. Tears were flowing freely down Emily's cheeks now, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she murmured. Yes to all of that. And as if to seal this promise, Grandma Rose's raspy but melodious voice rose from the garden, humming an old New England folk song about love that, like the century-old oak trees, bends but never breaks under the strongest winds. The New York autumn was painting Central Park in shades of gold and copper when Michael and Emily returned to the city. Their return didn't go unnoticed. The business media seized on the story of Jessica's betrayal, Michael's proven innocence, and his relationship with the mysterious Vermont florist. But what surprised the business world more was the announcement Michael made during his first press conference after his return. Standing before an assembly of eager journalists, Emily at his side, he declared, I am resuming my duties as CEO of the Anderson Group with a renewed vision. From today, our group will focus on sustainable, ethical real estate projects centered on community well-being. Our first project will be creating a network of urban garden shops in disadvantaged neighborhoods of New York, offering training, employment, and green spaces where they are sorely lacking. The room buzzed with confused murmurs. Michael Anderson, known for his ultra-modern office towers and luxury shopping centers, was now talking about community gardens. A journalist raised his hand. "Mr. Anderson, this new direction represents a radical change for your group. How do you explain this transformation?" Michael looked at Emily, then responded with a smile. "I've learned that there's more value in a tomato you've grown yourself than in a penthouse on the top floor." The cryptic response made the headlines the next day, generating more interest in his new initiative than any traditional marketing campaign. The first Bennett Garden, so named in tribute to Emily's family, opened its doors 3 months later in the Bronx. It was a hybrid space, at once a flower shop, an urban nursery, and a training center for young people in reintegration. Emily personally supervised its design and philosophy, incorporating her grandmother's lessons on respect for natural cycles and connection to the earth. It wasn't without challenges. The board of directors was skeptical. Some shareholders threatened to sell their shares, and Michael's old friends in the business world openly mocked what they called his altruism crisis. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of negotiations with reluctant investors, Michael returned to their new apartment, smaller than his former penthouse, but with an immense terrace that they had transformed into a suspended garden. Emily was waiting for him, preparing dinner with vegetables from their urban garden. "Difficult day?" she asked, noticing the lines of tension around his eyes. Michael sighed, loosening his tie. "Wilson withdrew his investment. He says I've become too idealistic for serious business." Emily nodded, understanding his frustration. "And what do you think?" Michael reflected for a moment, looking out the window at the lights of New York turning on one by one in the twilight. "I think I spent 20 years impressing men like Wilson, and it never made me happy." He turned to her with a tired but sincere smile. "I prefer to build something that will make my future wife smile, and perhaps one day our children." Emily felt her heart leap at this mention of a future they were just beginning to imagine together. She approached and embraced him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "I had news today, too," she said softly. "The Bennett Garden program has been selected for a partnership with the Department of Education. They want to extend it to 10 schools in priority zones." Michael turned to look at her, his eyes lighting up with pride. "Emily, that's extraordinary." "What's extraordinary," she corrected, "is seeing these children discover they can grow something with their own hands, seeing their wonder when they harvest their first salad or their first radish." Michael kissed her tenderly. "You've always known how to see beauty in simple things. It's one of the many gifts you've given me." That evening they dined on their terrace, under a sky where a few persistent stars managed to shine despite the light pollution of the city. The conversation drifted to their future plans. The wedding planned for the following spring in Grandma Rose's garden, the expansion of the Bennett Gardens, the possibility of buying a small house in Vermont where they could spend part of the year. "I received a message from Jessica today," Michael mentioned after a moment of comfortable silence. "She's in therapy. She says she's beginning to understand why she did what she did." Emily put down her fork, attentive. The wounds caused by Jessica's betrayal were still fresh. "She asks if she can see us," he continued. "Not now, but when we're ready." "What did you reply?" Emily asked softly. Michael looked at her, seeking her reaction. "That the door isn't closed, that with time and sincere efforts trust can be rebuilt, that I've learned the importance of forgiveness." Emily smiled, recognizing in these words the influence of the conversations they had had during those months on Martha's Vineyard. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. Later that night, lying side by side in the darkness, Michael murmured, "You know what I realized today?" "What?" whispered Emily, half asleep. "That I built my whole life thinking I was escaping poverty. But in reality, I was escaping the feeling of insignificance. I wanted to be someone, to leave a mark." He turned to her, caressing her face in the darkness. "Now, I understand that the real mark we leave isn't in concrete or contracts. It's in the lives we touch, the gardens we plant, knowing that we may never see all the fruits they will bear." Emily smiled in the darkness, moved by the depth of his reflection. "That's exactly what Grandma Rose always says." "Your grandmother is a very wise woman," murmured Michael, drawing her closer. "I hope to become as wise as she is one day." "You're on the right path," Emily replied, nestling against him. "You've already learned the most important lesson." "Which is?" That life isn't a straight line toward a single goal. It's a garden that we cultivate day after day, season after season, with patience and attention. In the darkness of their room, in the heart of New York that never slept, they found together the perfect silence that exists only between two souls who no longer need words to understand each other. The following spring brought to New York an explosion of colors and renewed energy that seemed to reflect the changes in Michael and Emily's life. The Bennett Gardens network had expanded to 6 locations in different neighborhoods, each adapted to the specific needs of its area. In the more affluent areas, they functioned as shop workshops, where stressed New Yorkers came to learn floral art and meditation through gardening. In the popular neighborhoods, they offered professional training programs and community spaces where residents grew their own vegetables. What had begun as an idealistic project was becoming a profitable and respected social enterprise model, attracting international attention. Michael had been invited to present this concept during a conference on sustainable urban planning in Barcelona, where his intervention had triggered a standing ovation, a first for this man once known for his ruthless business pragmatism. Emily, for her part, had discovered unsuspected talents within herself. Her innate understanding of plants had expanded to a holistic vision of urban ecology. She now coordinated a team of biologists, landscape architects, and social workers, creating spaces that were not only beautiful, but deeply functional and therapeutic. On a sunny April morning, Michael stood at the entrance of the latest Bennett Garden, located in a rehabilitated former factory on the outskirts of Brooklyn. He observed Emily guiding a group of teenagers in creating a living wall. Her patience, her ability to connect with these often difficult young people, always fascinated him. "Mr. Anderson?" A voice pulled him from his contemplation. Michael turned to see an elegant woman in her 50s, with a vaguely familiar face. "Forgive me for interrupting you," she continued. "I'm Helen Davis, former deputy mayor for urban planning." Michael remembered then she was one of the officials he had been accused of bribing in the Thompson case. He instinctively stiffened. "Mrs. Davis," he greeted her politely but coldly. To his surprise, she smiled. "I just wanted to tell you that what you've created here is remarkable, a true model of social and environmental integration." Michael looked at her, disconcerted. "Thank you, but I know our history isn't the most cordial," she interrupted him gently. "But sometimes the worst situations can lead to the best evolutions. What happened with the Thompson case was unfair and cruel to you. Yet look what was born from it." She made a gesture encompassing the vibrant space around them, the laughter of children, the buzzing of bees in the lavender, the elderly neighborhood residents sharing their knowledge with the younger ones. "You've transformed a personal crisis into a collective opportunity," she concluded. "That's the sign of a true leader." After her departure, Michael remained motionless, absorbing her words. He had never seen the events in this light. In his mind, the Thompson case had been a defeat, a humiliation he had overcome. But perhaps it was actually the necessary catalyst for his own metamorphosis. That evening, as Emily and he dined on the terrace of their apartment, he told her about this encounter. "She's right, you know," said Emily, serving him a glass of the Vermont wine he had learned to appreciate. "Look at yourself now compared to the man I met that night at the plaza." Michael smiled, remembering their first meeting, him in his impeccable suit, her on that unstable ladder. "I was arrogant, wasn't I?" he admitted. "You were protected," Emily gently corrected. "Like a nut with its hard shell. But inside," she placed a hand on his chest. "Inside, there was always this nourishing substance, waiting for the right moment to flourish." Michael covered her hand with his own. "You've always had this ability to see beyond appearances, to believe in the possibility of growth, even in the most arid soils. It's the fundamental principle of gardening," she replied with a mischievous smile. "Everything can flower with the right care and the right attention." That night they talked at length about the future. The Anderson Group, under Michael's new direction, was orienting more and more toward regenerative urban planning projects, transforming former industrial wastelands into vibrant neighborhoods, integrating urban agriculture into every new development, creating spaces that nourished both body and soul. "I received a proposal today," Emily mentioned as they prepared for bed. "Columbia University wants me to give a course on urban ecology and therapy through plants." Michael looked at her with pride. That's wonderful. You would be an extraordinary teacher. Emily hesitated. It would mean less time for the Bennett Gardens, at least temporarily. The gardens will continue to flourish, Michael assured her. You've built a formidable team, and this opportunity would allow you to share your vision with even more people. He took her in his arms. Isn't that what we're trying to do? Plant seeds that will continue to grow well beyond us? Emily kissed him, moved by his understanding and support. Who would have thought that the real estate shark would become a gardening philosopher? Michael laughed. Life is full of surprises, the biggest being that sometimes we find our true path only by getting completely lost. That night, as Emily slept peacefully beside him, Michael remained awake, contemplating the journey traveled. He thought of that hungry, angry young man from the Bronx, determined to conquer a world he perceived as hostile, of the ruthless businessman he had become, building walls ever higher around his heart, and now of the man he was becoming, still strong, still determined, but now open, vulnerable, connected. True power, he murmured in the darkness, remembering Grandma Rose's words, is not to control, but to nurture, not to possess, but to share, not to take, but to give. And for the first time in his life, Michael Anderson felt truly powerful. Summer had arrived with an unusual heat wave that transformed New York into an urban furnace. In the Bennett Gardens, irrigation systems worked day and night to keep the thirsty plants alive, while the teams organized water distributions and cooling zones for the residents of the most affected neighborhoods. Michael was in a meeting with his board of directors when Robert burst into the room, his face grave. "Excuse the interruption," he said, "but I need to speak to Michael immediately. It's urgent." In the corridor, Robert handed him his phone. "It's New York Presbyterian Hospital. Emily had a fainting spell during her class at the university." Michael's world seemed to stop. A fainting spell? What kind of fainting spell? She's conscious, Robert quickly reassured him. "But they want to keep her for observation." Michael rushed to the hospital, his mind whirling with catastrophic scenarios. He found Emily in a private room, pale but smiling, monitoring wires attached to her arm. "It's nothing," she said immediately upon seeing his terrified expression. "I just got dizzy because of the heat. These doctors are overreacting." But the doctor who entered shortly after had an expression that contradicted this lightness. "Mr. Anderson, Miss Bennett," he began gravely, "we've done some preliminary analyses and I'm afraid the situation is more complex than a simple heat stroke." Michael felt his throat tighten. "What is it?" "The analyses show a cardiac condition," the doctor explained. "A mild hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but one that requires attention and follow-up." Michael felt the floor give way beneath his feet. A cardiac condition. Emily. The two words could not coexist in his mind. "Is it?" He couldn't pronounce the word serious. "It's not immediately dangerous," the doctor specified, "but it requires lifestyle changes, medication, and regular checkups. Without treatment, it could gradually worsen." Emily was squeezing Michael's hand so hard he could feel her nails digging into his palm, but her face remained calm, almost serene. "What lifestyle changes?" she asked practically. The doctor listed several. Avoid excessive stress, limit intense physical activity, take daily medication, have regular checkups. Nothing impossible, but a significant revision of the active life she led between the university and the community gardens. After the doctor's departure, a heavy silence fell over the room. Michael stared at their joined hands, unable to look Emily in the eyes, terrified of what he might see there. "Michael," she said softly, "look at me." When he finally raised his eyes, what he saw surprised him. Not fear, not despair, but a quiet determination. "We will get through this," she said, with an assurance that amazed him. "It's just another obstacle on our path." Michael felt his throat knot with emotion. How could she be so strong when he felt like he was falling apart inside? "I'm afraid," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I've built my whole life on control, on the ability to shape the world to my will, and now faced with something I can't control." Emily placed a hand on his cheek. "Maybe that's the final lesson, my love. Accepting that some things are beyond our control, and still finding beauty and joy in uncertainty." In the days that followed, Michael transformed into an obsessive researcher. He consulted the best cardiologist in the United States, read dozens of medical articles, explored all possible treatment options. Emily watched him with a mixture of amusement and tenderness, recognizing in this frenzy his way of managing fear, trying to transform it into a solvable problem. One evening, when she found him still awake at 3 in the morning, reading an article on the latest advances in cardiology, she sat beside him and gently closed his laptop. "Michael," she said kindly, "you can't heal my heart by not sleeping." He looked at her, his eyes red from fatigue and worry. "I have to do something, Emily. I can't just wait." She took his hands in hers. "You know what would really help my heart? For you to take care of yours, for you to accept this new reality, not as a sentence, but as a reminder. A reminder of what? Of the fragility and preciousness of every moment." She placed a hand on his chest. "My heart is different, but it still beats. And every beat is a gift that I no longer take for granted." The tears that Michael had held back since the announcement of the diagnosis finally began to flow. Emily held him against her, gently rocking him as one would console a child. "I can't lose you," he murmured against her shoulder. "You are everything." "You won't lose me," she promised. "Not today, not tomorrow, and for the rest, no one has guarantees, Michael." Perfect heart or not, that night marked a turning point in their relationship. Emily's newly revealed vulnerability had brought out an even deeper tenderness in Michael, and his own vulnerability, which he had finally let appear, had strengthened their connection in a way he would never have believed possible. In the weeks that followed, they adapted their life to this new reality. Michael reorganized his schedule to be more present. Emily reduced her hours at the university, but developed a therapeutic gardening program specifically designed for people suffering from chronic diseases, once again transforming a personal challenge into an opportunity for collective growth. Together, they created a medicinal garden on their terrace, not just for the therapeutic properties of the plants, but for the therapy of gardening itself. Each morning they had their coffee amid the aromatic herbs and medicinal flowers, discussing their plans for the day, savoring the simplicity of this shared moment. One morning, as the sun rose over New York, bathing their little urban paradise in golden light, Michael took Emily's hand. "I realize something," he said softly. "This cardiac condition, as frightening as it is, it has offered us a gift." Emily raised an interrogative eyebrow. "It has reminded us that love isn't just in grand gestures and dramatic moments. It's in these quiet moments, in coffee shared at dawn, in daily small attentions, in the willingness to go through storms and calms together." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with that quiet wisdom that had first drawn him to her that night at the plaza, that now seemed to belong to another life. "That's exactly what love is," she confirmed. "Not fireworks, but a candle that burns faithfully, even in the darkest nights." And as the city awakened around them, they remained seated in silence, hand in hand, in the midst of their suspended garden. Two souls who had found in the very fragility of existence its deepest beauty. 2 years had passed since that evening at the plaza that had changed their lives forever. It was June again, but this time Michael and Emily stood in Grandma Rose's garden on Martha's Vineyard, surrounded only by their closest friends and family. The house with blue shutters had been decorated with garlands of wildflowers and paper lanterns that would sway gently in the sea breeze when evening came. Rustic tables covered with natural linen tablecloths waited under the century-old oak trees. Everything was simple, authentic, like the path they had traveled together. Emily wore an ivory silk dress, without frills or excessive ornaments. Her hair was braided with sprigs of lavender and small white flowers that Grandma Rose had gathered at dawn. Michael had abandoned the traditional suit for simple linen pants and a white shirt, his feet bare on the grass like those of his future wife. Before the ceremony, they walked together to the beach, where they had found each other during their first great separation. The Atlantic Ocean sparkled under the afternoon sun, so intensely blue it seemed unreal. "Nervous?" Michael asked, squeezing her hand in his. Emily smiled, shaking her head. "Strangely, no. I feel like we've been married for a long time already, in all the ways that truly matter." Michael nodded, perfectly understanding what she meant. Their journey had been a series of vows, unspoken, but deeply honored, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in hardship, in moments of joy, and in those of despair. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small wooden box from his pocket. A wedding gift. Emily opened it delicately. Inside was a simple silver pendant containing what appeared to be a seed. "It's a seed from the first apple tree we planted together in the Bronx Bennett garden," Michael explained. "It represents everything we've built and everything that's still to come." Emily felt the tears rise, touched by the profound symbolism of this gift. "It's perfect," she murmured, letting him fasten the necklace around her neck. "I have something for you, too," she said, pulling out an envelope from the hidden pocket of her dress. "Though it's not exactly a gift I can wrap." Michael opened the envelope, taking out a simple sheet of paper. It was a letter from Emily's doctor, confirming that her cardiac condition had stabilized thanks to treatment and lifestyle changes. The prognosis was favorable for a long and active life. He looked at her, unable to speak, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. "I couldn't promise you forever without giving you this assurance," she explained softly. "Or at least as much assurance as life can offer." They returned to the garden hand in hand, ready to exchange their vows before their loved ones. The ceremony was simple, officiated by an old friend of Emily's family, but it was their personal vows that deeply touched all present. "Emily," Michael began, his voice strong and clear despite the emotion, "before you I built walls. With you I've learned to cultivate gardens. You've shown me that true strength isn't in control but in vulnerability, that true wealth isn't in possession but in sharing." He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promise you not perfection, but constant effort. Not the absence of storms, but my hand in yours when they strike. Not a path without obstacles, but the courage to face them together." Emily wiped away a tear before beginning her own vows. "Michael, when we met, I was a girl who had never left her small town, who dreamed of the world without daring to explore it. You gave me wings, not by saving me, but by believing I could fly on my own." Her voice strengthened, full of contained emotion. "I promise to be your anchor when the world becomes too chaotic, your challenge when you become too comfortable, your partner in every adventure. I promise to love you not despite your imperfections, but with them, because they are part of the extraordinary man you are." When they exchanged their rings, simple gold bands without ornamentation, the sun was beginning to descend toward the horizon, bathing the garden in a golden light that seemed to bless their union. The evening that followed was filled with laughter, dancing, deep conversations, and moments of pure joy. Grandma Rose, more alive and energetic than ever at 82, danced with Michael, whispering in his ear secrets of conjugal longevity that he listened to with the concentration of a student before a revered master. Paul, Michael's older brother, came with his new wife, an artist he had met after his divorce and who had transformed his vision of the world almost as much as Emily had transformed Michael's. Even Jessica was present, more humble and authentic than she had ever been, slowly beginning to rebuild the bridges she had burned. Robert raised his glass for a toast. "To Michael and Emily, who have taught us that the most beautiful stories aren't those that avoid difficulties, but those that transform them into springboards towards something better." Later in the evening, as the stars began to appear in the New England sky, Michael and Emily moved a little away from the party. They stood at the exact spot where, more than a year earlier, he had asked for her hand with an amethyst found on the beach. "Look," Emily said softly, pointing toward the garden where their guests were dancing and laughing under the lanterns. "All these people whose lives have been touched by our story, by the choices we've made." Michael followed her gaze, seeing the joyful faces of their loved ones, the couples that had formed thanks to their joint projects, the unlikely friendships born in the Bennett gardens. "It's like a garden, isn't it?" he said, understanding the metaphor. "We planted a few seeds and look what has bloomed." Emily nodded, nestling against him. "And we don't even see all the blossomings. There are seeds that will germinate long after us, connections we can never trace back to their source." Michael kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of lavender in her hair. "That's the true legacy," he murmured. "Not buildings or fortunes, but these invisible blossomings that continue to flourish, even when we're no longer here to see them." They remained like this for a long time, embraced under the stars, listening to the music and laughter rising from the garden. Two beings who had met by chance, who had weathered storms and calms, and who had discovered in shared love the deepest of wisdom, that it is in our connections with others that we find our true immortality. "Ready to return to our celebration, Mrs. Anderson?" Michael asked with a smile. Emily returned his smile, her eyes shining with love and promises. "Ready for everything that awaits us, Mr. Bennett Anderson." Hand in hand they returned toward the light and music, toward their chosen family, toward the future they would continue to build together, day after day, season after season, blossom after blossom. In every garden, even the humblest, lies the infinite. In every love, even the most tested, is found eternity. Grandma Rose.